Yeah, couldn't get it on my computer, so I got onto my phone.
Excellent.
All right, brilliant, yeah. Okay. Right, we'll get started then. I'm Rebecca Bradley. This is the Virtual Crime Book Club, and this month we are discussing Blood Orange by Harriet Tyce. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm really pleased with the turnout this month, so thank you everybody. Okay, we'll start with the first open question of, did you enjoy the book?
That's a hard question because...
Oh, wait a minute, Margot. We've got somebody else just joining. Sorry, I'll let them come in. And then they won't be stopping you mid-speech then. I thought. Oh, hi. Hi, Katie. Can you hear us?
Yes, fine.
Brilliant. We've just started, and I just asked, what did everybody think of the book? And Margot was just about to speak when you came in, so we're going to let Margot go now.
Are you sure you want to?
No. Yes, we are.
I thought it was very well written in terms of style and things like that. I thought it was, it kept my interest and all that sort of thing. But, and maybe I'm stealing one of your later questions, Rebecca. The only character that I really felt sympathetic for and caring for and really interested in was the little girl Matilda. I had a very difficult time warming to the other characters, and not just for the obvious reasons, but I mean, Madeline, I could see her, I could see some sympathy for her, but so if you asked if I enjoyed the book, the writing style, absolutely. Real sense of place and time and urgency and all of those things. The characters, I found it difficult to like any of them except for Matilda.
What about everybody else?
I'd agree with that, to be honest. This is my first meeting, so I'm not really sure how this works. Is it?
Just say what you think, yeah.
Okay. I'd agree with Margot entirely. I couldn't basically find any kind of empathy with the characters. I found it really difficult to like any of them apart from, like you say, Matilda. And I kind of read the book and enjoyed it for what it was. I found it quite difficult to consider it a crime book somehow. It didn't really read like a crime book to me. It was, it felt a lot lighter, and there didn't seem to be any kind of real element around crime in it, apart from obviously a murder. But the whole crime element was very low, I think. And obviously the issues with the husband later on.
I think from my point of view is that not only did it have no characters that I particularly felt any sympathy with, because it was written in the present tense, the reader isn't given any space in order to distance herself from them. So you're really in there with all these unpleasant characters, so it doesn't make it a very enjoyable experience.
I'd actually go along with everything that's been said. I didn't like any of the characters apart from Matilda. I found it actually quite claustrophobic in a lot of ways. I think the bits where Madeline was involved, I thought it was very well written. Now you've got to give the writer that. But I just didn't enjoy it. I have to say, if I wasn't reading it for the book club, I wouldn't have finished it. I'd have got about a third of the way through and stopped. And also, I wasn't over keen on some of the editing. I thought it could have been edited better. I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
What did you feel needed taken out?
Well, in particular because it was written in the first person, so many times it was obvious who was speaking, which was her, and you know, she'd say something and then I said, or I'll say, and you think, well, why is that there? You know, and I couldn't help it, but it sort of stopped the flow, because all right, occasionally, but it was so obvious that she was speaking, so why would you need that? Yeah, it was that type of thing. And also, I don't know if it was something to do with my settings, but throughout there were areas that were underlined, and you could see the underlining, and then they had something like they'd obviously been highlighted at some point. Did you have that?
I
You
think
can
that might be
remove
your
those.
Kindle
It's on your
setting.
Kindle setting.
Yeah, I did wonder if it. I wanted
The
to
Kindle
wonder if it
setting.
was- yeah, I did wonder if it was my setting or not.
I always
when
find
you're
that really
reading
interesting.
What,
I
sorry?
do.
I always find it really interesting to see which bits other people, because you can see that 223 people have highlighted, and I think, oh, okay, they must have found that interesting or intriguing, or. But I think I'm just nosy.
No, I'm the same. I like seeing the highlighted bits. But you can highlight sections of the book, and then other people can see how many people have highlighted those sentences, and that's what you see on your Kindle.
Who were you remember by the looks of it, or by the sound of it?
Sorry, dog's going mad.
So
I think it was an interesting study in characters that were quite difficult to like. I mean, I totally agree with the comments about that. But I did think the quality of the writing drew me through the book. I wanted to find out, you know, how it was going to end. It felt more like a domestic noir than a crime, I think, to me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
knowing that she was on the crime,
I
kind of had a
yeah,
clue.
sorry. Sorry, Wendy.
No, go for it. It's fine.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's a sort of time lag on flipping Zoom, isn't it? Had you finished? Did you want to
carry on?
Yeah, I found it really interesting. Sorry, my internet connection thing went, so I don't know what you said while I was faffing around and trying to get back on. I didn't have, just thinking about seeing what you were saying, I didn't have any issues with the editing. I said, I think, or she said, or whatever, I had issues with that. I first read this book about, I don't know, a year ago, and I sort of read it a bit on, audio and some on Kindle. So I reread it, to prepare for this evening, and it was interesting actually, because I actually much preferred reading it than listening to it on audio. I found the story very compelling. I found, I really wanted to know what was going to happen. But listening to it on audio, I found the pace was quite slow. Although I was interested and wanted to carry on reading, but one of the main problems for me was that I guessed. Obviously, I didn't realise at the beginning, but I guessed almost immediately, almost from that first chapter. Well, in fact, the first chapter, and then as soon as it said about the husband being a therapist, I immediately guessed that he was the perpetrator. So that sort of slightly.
Yeah.
And then other things as we went along, I just thought it's got to be here. Well, because really, it was only going to be Patrick or it was going to be Carl. And I kind of thought that, Patrick was going to, so basically both elements of the plot about what Patrick did and what Carl did, I actually guessed, right from the beginning. And I kind of really, I kept on reading because I found it interesting. But to find out if, because often what you think is going to happen is wrong, and I thought, I'm sure it's wrong, but I don't know. Yeah, so I kind of got to the end and then thought, oh, okay, so yeah, those were kind of what I figured. But I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed rereading it as well, reading it twice.
I had the same reaction that you did as far as picking up on things quickly. It wasn't long before I was saying, he is gaslighting her.
Yeah.
And how can she not even consider that this could be possible? He's gaslighting her. Now I get it that these things happen, but that seemed to me a bit hard to take. Honestly, it did. Especially when she starts getting those threatening texts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I identified him almost from the first time he's introduced as probably being the baddie, because he was the only reasonable person.
Reasonable suspect.
Yeah.
But what was
that many.
Go on. I wonder if the author actually intended to show that although she was very well capable of seeing the gaslighting and seeing the unhappy marriage in somebody else's case that she has taken on to take to court to defend this woman, she herself was incapable of seeing it in her own case, because I think so often in life we're so quick to see other people's faults, to comment on other people's marriages and so on, and yet we can't see when it's happening to us. We've got a bit of a blind spot. So I wonder if that was on purpose. It was a bit far-fetched, but maybe on purpose.
That's an interesting possibility. I thought about that myself, actually, when I was reading it. I thought, how can this woman who can see what's happening in this other marriage, who knows herself well enough to know that she should not be involved with Patrick, she should not be drinking, all these other things, who can see the mistakes she's made, cannot see how badly and cruelly she's being manipulated. She's a bright woman. You know, didn't find her particularly sympathetic, but that doesn't mean she's bright, she's capable, and she sees it, but she does not see how Carl is just doing these things to her, manipulating her emotionally, sexually, psychologically, whatever. It seems to me it might have been done deliberately, as you point out, because that is possible, that does happen. I don't know, that was one of the few pieces of the stories that I thought was sort of, I would have liked it maybe a bit more smooth, and I'm sorry I can't express it better, but it just didn't ring true to me the way some of the other parts of the story did.
I think part of that is because they made her, she was made out to be a sort of a barely functioning alcoholic, and it's back to the unreliable narrator sort of thing, although she wasn't the narrator, but she's unreliable and her thoughts are unreliable because of her alcohol intake, which, you know, is a bit of an excuse, you know, a way of getting around a plot problem, if you like, which I find a bit trying, and I found it in this case, and I'm not particularly sympathetic to alcoholics. I'm sorry if there's any here, but you know, so I sort of felt I wasn't sympathetic to her because half her problems were because she was pissed out of her head most of the time.
I think I definitely felt that as a character, one of the reasons I found it really difficult to relate to her, although I wanted to, because she was in this dire situation, is that trying to overcome the feeling that if she was as bright as I thought she was as a character, that she would have known something else was going on and been smart enough to work it out. So I think that sort of the two sides of that stopped me from really believing in her totally, and that stopped me from being on her side completely and wanting her to sort of come through, because I didn't really believe what was happening for some of it. And I think that is a difficulty of having an unreliable narrator who isn't on the surface very likable, and then doesn't do anything, in as far as I could tell, please correct me, but doesn't do anything remarkable to get herself out of it. Things happen rather than her making things happen.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of an issue with that, but it is, I mean, for me, I found it so well written, and I'm afraid I disagree with the editing. I had no issue with that at all. I thought the editing worked for me perfectly well, and it sort of drew me through, but because of the central character and that sort of two sides of it, I did struggle with that in sort of being totally lost in the world of the novel, which I like to do as a reader. So it kept busting me out into reality again. Annoying.
Yeah. Do you have to like the characters to enjoy a book?
Oh, absolutely not. You don't have to like a character to enjoy the book. It's easier.
But it's already been mentioned that there were no likable characters other than the child. So could you enjoy that book even though there were no likable characters?
I think that's what kept me reading, was the fact that she was such a train wreck, and she just kept making poor decision after poor decision after poor decision. And I'm like, you gotta wise up sometime. Like, you gotta change. So I kept going, just waiting for her to make a better choice. And then that was just sort of the catalyst for it. She acted on emotion. Like, if she would have stopped and thought about it instead of picking up the next drink, like, she probably could have figured it out a lot faster. I thought she was going to just take out her husband the same way that Madeline took out hers, or yeah, I was, and that's what I was waiting for. I'm like, I've got this figured out. This is what she's going to do, and she didn't. He took himself out, but kind of. But still, like, I feel like sometimes having that narrator that does make those poor choices does keep you reading and does keep you interested.
So following on from that, and also giving a different perspective, I didn't actually find Alison unlikable. I did quite like her. And, I did feel frustrated, when she, oh, whoops, and I want a glass number 3, and kind of like, oh, God. But I did feel quite sympathetic towards her, because I felt like she was kind of caught up in something that, she wasn't quite in control of. And what actually did make it realistic for me was this thing that we hear about quite a lot, in cases of where, and it reminded me a little bit of Apple Tree Yard and Yvonne Carmichael and whatever, and this intelligent woman getting caught up in a situation that you just think wouldn't her intellect and her rational mind kind of keep her safe. But actually, I felt that she was more savvy to kind of Patrick's shortcomings, than to her husband. So, she kept saying, I need to finish this, and she kept trying to finish with him, but then she kind of get caught up in it. But I felt that she seemed to really see Patrick, because he did have a good side, sort of to him. But she also saw, all the ways in which he was really very monstrous and incredibly sexist, and, all the things that I'm sure we all think. But I didn't quite understand with Carl, why she didn't see it so much in her own husband. Maybe it is because he was, he's in the house and she wanted to see the best of him, or, or whatever, because there were things that he said to her. I think, like, reading that prologue, and as soon as we saw that we learned that he was a sex therapist, and the first time he put her down, I thought then, whoa, hang on a sec, she didn't rear up, and say, don't speak to me like that. And that annoyed me about her. I wanted her to say, don't speak to me like that, I don't like it. So I didn't feel wholly unsympathetic towards her, and I didn't dislike her. Yeah,
I think I got impatient with her for just the reason you pointed out. Here's a bright, educated, smart woman who has ambition and so on and so on. And you can tell that when she's on the job, and yet she allows herself to be put down and demeaned and a lot of other things. And she swallows it hook, line, and sinker, as the saying goes. I did get fed up with that. And that was a little bit of what made her unlikable to me. And yet, you have to remember, Carl is a psychotherapist. He's very good at getting people to think what he wants them to think. And he's very good at manipulating. That doesn't excuse it, but maybe it helps just a little bit to explain why a woman like Alison would allow him to speak to her that way and would allow him to manipulate her that way. That's the only explanation I could come up with that didn't thoroughly annoy me.
I have to say, I it's not necessarily, so I have no problems with being fascinated by unlikable characters, and there are plenty of unlikable characters who are the most memorable, if you like, in books. But with her, I just felt she lacked a little bit of credibility. And that's exactly what I think you're getting at, Margot, and Vicky perhaps as well, where she was self-hating and self-destructive, but I didn't quite get a sense of why was she like that when she had everything going for her. What was the problem? So yes, she was working hard, but a lot of people are working hard without going quite like that. So there was this kind of, she was pushing herself to the extreme, but I couldn't quite understand why that was the case.
How did you feel about her assumption that because she was a working mother, she was a bad mother?
surely not to that degree, you know. And then how was she going to make it better by drinking?
I thought that was part of Carl's gaslighting, because he kept saying to her, you know, you're a dreadful, you know, I felt she, like, you know, she'd internalized, which is kind of what happens with gaslighting. It's easy to think, you know, that because somebody's intelligent and, you know, in a high powered profession and obviously very good at it, that, you know, that they should be able to, you know, be immune to that the kind of effects that go on in gaslighting. And I thought, you see, for me, that's something that I see and hear and, you know, and read about a lot for women, you know, intelligent women who are extremely good in their professions, but, you know, who aren't so competent and capable and confident in their personal lives.
Don't you think that this is, I totally understand what you're saying, and in reality, I am aware that this works on this level, you know, all the time. But in fiction, I think the trouble is we demand a little bit more of an underlying explanation. And I would have liked to know a little bit more how she'd got into this depth so quickly, but we didn't see her get there. We didn't really see much of her protest and then being overcome and worn down and kind of to accept that this, you know, she was worthless and a bad mother and all this, because she was so accepting at the beginning.
Yes.
And didn't have an explanation. I think I felt that was the lack. I mean, it wasn't that these things don't happen, because you're absolutely right, it's exactly how it works. But I think that's one of the things fiction has to be really careful about. You know, if you write it the way it works, it doesn't always work on the page as well as, it doesn't feel as real as reality.
You know that the saying is, right, reality doesn't have to make sense, fiction does. But the fact is, I was just thinking the same thing, that I would have liked to know why she has that blind spot. And it would have been interesting, let me put it this way, if we knew a bit about her growing up years, or we knew a bit about perhaps an incident that happened, or we knew a bit about something that made her feel so in Carl's debt and so whatever, that she accepts what he says without question. I don't know any marriage, including my own, in which that happens. And I know that it does. I mean, there's evidence all over the place. So I'm not questioning that, but I'm thinking, no, wait a minute. If somebody talked that way to me, they would get about 2 words out.
I must admit, if I found her to be a very weak person, as the character is meant to be, even though she was a barrister and a high-flying, powerful role, powerful job, and when she was acting as a barrister, I found her to be good unless Patrick was there. But the moment she went back to home, or is it outside of the work life, she came across to me as a very weak person and was easily manipulated. Oh, stay for the extra drink, or don't go tonight, come around my house, or, you know, but towards the end, I really felt for her with the abuse, I suppose, that Carl had put to her and was controlling her.
Did anyone else? How do people feel about the ending of the book? You know, when she comes home and finds him, coincidentally, in the erotic asphyxiation scene. I mean, do people believe that, or did it jar?
It seemed a bit contrived to me, I must admit. A bit convenient.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a bit strange that she was in the room at the time watching, I've got this right, she was watching the recording, wasn't she? But then she went a bit further into the room and then she found him, and I think that she might have been aware of him a little bit earlier. That was what struck me as a bit odd.
I did applaud her decision, though, to do nothing.
Absolutely.
that seemed absolutely right to me. I'm sorry, this is being recorded, right?
Found her guts.
but she did do something, though, because she pulled the table away.
She pulled the table away.
Helped him along.
Right.
So and there's cameras everywhere, and they sort of tried to pass it off right at the end, didn't they? Saying, "Oh, the police never did anything." Or
It felt a little bit
that really wasn't true bit to me. I was like, no, that wouldn't happen. She might pull the table away, but you know.
I wondered if those two bits, like, you know, the beginning and end, has sort of been bookended, you know, like in the editorial process or something, because as soon as I was really not surprised, those were the last scenes. Oh, hello, pussycat. Hello. I really wasn't surprised at all, because as soon as we got into that prologue, and I thought, you know, he's done this before, so I thought, okay, we're meant to think he's a serial murderer, but then after 2 paragraphs, I realised that it was auto asphyxiation, and I just assumed that's how it was going to end. So for me, kind of, it wasn't a shock.
It was. I had to put the book down at one point when it came out that the sort of abuse she was facing from him, and that really jarred me. And I was like, oh my god, you know. And I literally put the book down and had to stop and think a bit and then get back into it. But you know, right at the end though, that just didn't. It was a bit sort of okay.
I was wondering also about all the kind of parallels, or I don't know if you've got 3 things that are working simultaneously. You can call them in parallel, or if that's just 2 things. But the fact that you know, she had this abusive relationship with Carl, her husband, plus she was in this abusive relationship with Patrick, and then plus she seemed to keep picking up these flipping clients that had all these, were in these sexually abusive, gaslighting relationships, and I just kind of thought, oh, you know, that was a bit much. I mean, maybe, I suppose, you know, if she was attracted to that sort of man, I don't know, maybe, what did other people think about that?
You know, I wondered about that too, because of the similarities between Patrick and Carl. And if you think about it, while I don't think Patrick was truly gaslighting her, I think she did refuse to see the kind of person he was. Remember later in the book when it comes out that he's a rapist, she doesn't want to believe that it's that it's Patrick. You know, she's quicker to accept that, but she just may be one of those people who has that sort of blind spot. We all have faults. Maybe that's one of hers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, talking about parallels, I must admit, what I thought was very clever was the way that her story seemed to run in parallel with Madeline's story.
Yeah.
And even right until the end, where, you know, the son actually did it, but he got away with it. And even there was one point when they both got a cut on their face, and it seemed to lead us down the track of, well, she's going to kill him in the end. And I thought, well, she's not going to kill him, because that's the way we're being led. It sort of became quite, you know, clear. So I suppose it was a bit of relief that there was a bit of a twist at the end, but I thought it was all a bit too boxed up, you know, a bit contrived, but very clever without a doubt.
The thing about Madeleine, I mean, I quite liked that, because it's quite tropey in crime fiction, isn't it? That you know, the person, the protagonist, the case they have to deal with. So if it's the cop, you know, the cop learns things about themselves through the cases they're having to investigate. And so, like, you know, with the thing about Madeleine, you know, I felt that sort of nudged her into a greater sense of understanding. I couldn't believe she went out for lunch with the woman though, and like when she said, you know, let's, you know, whatever, they both had a small glass of wine, and then even then she couldn't control herself, and I found that, because that wasn't a personal setting, you know. And I thought, flipping hell, woman, boundaries, you know, you're not with Patrick now, you know. And it's like, and then they were ordering another second bottle of red wine, and I was thinking, oh my god, surely someone's going to say this isn't going to be admissible, or I don't know, I think I was getting whatever.
Well,
and she's a barrister.
Sorry, she did try and account for that though by sort of saying, "Oh, I had to put her at her ease" or something, didn't she?
Yeah.
Making excuses for it.
Yeah, we can all make excuses.
Yeah.
The only thing that really not annoyed me, but I was a bit disappointed, was the right at the early part when she said she was remanded in a prison. She said it was Downview. And I think that what they've done is looked up where it was set in a bit in Clapham area, and they've looked up where the nearest female prison is, and it's Downview, but it's a training prison. It doesn't take remand prisoners. That really quite annoyed me, because it should have been Bronzefield. So yeah, a little bit better research on that front. But the rest of the book, I absolutely adored. I loved it. I just couldn't put it down.
Well, that surprises me, because I looked Harriet up, and she's been a practicing barrister for 10 years.
Yeah.
So she should know a prison. So that's
well, she should have known Downview. Downview is a training prison. It only takes sentenced prisoners, and it was like I was reminded to Downview, which just doesn't happen.
But she might have just decided to change things around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like, I like the fact that this was perhaps based on the, Sally Chadwick case, which of course changed law as to coercive behaviour being a defence in murder, and that she was released. And in some ways, I sort of felt that detracted slightly from the book, because the end, she should have got to it much quicker, because by the time this book was published, the Sally Chadwick case had the Supreme Court had ruled that it is grounds for manslaughter rather than murder appeal. You'd thought they'd have jumped on it quicker.
Which storyline held your interest more, the Madeline one or the one with Alison and Carl?
For me, Madeline, certainly.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too, actually.
And I was very interested in the character of Madeline's son. I would have liked to get to know him just a little better. I mean, we get to know him a bit with his letter and so on. But I thought that family dynamic and what might have led to the murder and who did exactly what really kept the attention very well.
Yes, I thought it was very, very well written. That very good. I must admit, I felt that at some point there was going to be a twist in that story, and that the abuse of the son was going to come from her. But fortunately, that didn't happen.
I thought there was enough twists in it already. There
was
those three stories going on and on and on. I mean, I thought early on the son, when I was reading that side of it, but I didn't see Carl coming. That really knocked me backwards, I suppose.
One relationship I thought was really nice was that between Alison and Matilda. I thought that was, it was only a sort of small part, but I was really pleased the way Harriet wrote that, and the fact that it was so clear that Matilda and her mother were really close, and so Carl's attempts to undermine their relationship and put sort of, I don't know, I got the sense, I'm not sure if we were told that he was doing it explicitly, but that he was trying to put Matilda off her mother and stuff, which just would have, it's just infuriating when people do that, but there was like a really clear sort of love between them, and I thought that was really nice and really touching.
And it did show a really good side of Alison's character, with all her faults and with all of her this and that, she really does love her daughter. She wants to be a good mom. And it also, if you think of this was what struck me, it also gave the reader a hint. If it wasn't clear already, maybe Carl isn't saying everything, or maybe he's lying or something. Because and Alison even comes to that conclusion herself. I love my kid. I'm a good mom. I wish I were home more.
I think that was a kind of saving grace of her character for me, was the fact that although she was very hard on herself at times for being a bad mother, actually, she was doing her best to be a good mother quite a lot of the time. Not all the time, but given how driven she was to succeed in her career and being the breadwinner and all the other things, I think that really kind of saved her for me and made me want her to get on top of this and find a way through.
When Matilda got lost, I had to take a break. I had to stop because I felt like in the writing, I felt it. Like I was looking at my kid and I'm like, oh my gosh. So very well written, much to my own horror.
That was a bit too well written. It was a bit sort of traumatic, wasn't it?
It was.
Well, I have to say, because so many psychological thrillers, there is something happens to the child. And so I had this sort of fear, oh no, are we going down that territory? And also, do you think that maybe the predictability that you've been saying, so some of you have been saying, and I too kind of thought at once, oh, the husband, something's not right there. Is that because so many of the recent psychological thrillers and domestic noirs, it's been the husband who was the bad guy? So do you think that maybe we've just kind of become used to that and it's not the fault of the author, really?
Yeah, partly. Yeah, I think we're looking out for certain twists and things. Yeah, definitely.
But the way he reacted to her was just horrible. When Matilda was missing, how come the cops didn't step in? Like, you're calling her names in, like, I wondered, like, I just felt like a police officer at that point probably would have stepped in and been like, hold up, you know, this is a bad example for your child. You cannot call her these names. And they didn't seem to say anything. They were just sort of okay with it. I was shocked. And that's when I really started to turn on Carl and hope he went down.
I was wondering also with the, you know, whether kind of part of what Harriet Tyce, it'd be interesting to ask her these things actually, you know, was kind of wanting to show or kind of shine a light on, excuse the cliche, you know, misogyny, you know, and sexism and so on. And I found that really interesting. I didn't realise kind of until I read this book, and also until I started chatting to Harriet on Twitter. I sort of knew, I think vaguely, but mainly only from films, you know, and hearsay and whatever, that, you know, there was such a lot of drinking, you know, in the world of barristerdom, you know, etc. And I thought that was really well done, you know, that the sort of the sexism, the culture of, you know, of the drinking culture of just drinking, you know, every night. And you know, yeah, and also I think that was something else that made me feel more sympathetic towards Alison than, you know, I might have done, is that she seemed, you know, she was in a male-dominated world, and, you know, she'd obviously had to really graft, you know, in that male-dominated world, you know, to win that first murder case, you know, with Madeleine's case. And yeah, I found that really interesting, and I thought that she did it very well.
Did anybody change opinions about any of the characters while you were reading? You pretty much had them set from the start.
I suppose I sympathised a bit more with Alison towards the end, as she was trying, whereas at the beginning, I just felt she was not a very nice person.
Yeah, I think the way.
So did any of them actually travel a journey, do you think? Because in a lot of novels, you get a character that starts in one place and then ends in another place. Do we think that any of the characters did that in this?
Yeah, I think Alison did, yeah, because she, by the end, you know, she'd reassessed her values and realised that the child was the most important thing. And yeah, I think she had sort of grown and developed as a character.
And I think her decision to come away from, you know, something that she had worked towards and was building her career on, and to go into a different career path, really, so that she could be a better mother and be there for her child. I mean, that was her, you know, a big kind of revelation moment. So underneath all the drinking and the striving and the bad language and all the other, you know, sexual misbehavior or whatever, and the griminess of it all. I mean, some of the imagery was just horrible, wasn't it?
Yes.
I'm not saying that we haven't all occasionally got extremely drunk and done things that we'd rather not, but to see it on the page in all that detail was quite kind of grubby. And then she came out of it as somebody who had absolutely reassessed her values. What's the most important thing to me? I cannot do that when I'm in this culture. I have to be in a better culture, doing a better thing. And that for me made me go, you know, rah rah, and finish the book on a real high. So yeah, that worked for me.
Yeah.
And I thought that, you know, pulling the table out from underneath him, you know, really was, you know, this ends now, you know, this stops now. And you know, in a way, there couldn't have been more of a kind of symbol of her, yeah, you know, kind of enlightenment or something or other, I think.
Are you suggesting it's enlightened to kill your husband?
Not on video, she's not.
But I wonder if in a way that's exactly the sort of revenge of the weak, because as Craig was saying, she does come across as a rather weak and easily manipulated, easily guided or badly guided person. So I think, you know, when it accumulates and accumulates and you let that frustration build up and build up, then you do overreact. So you do something extreme. So while somebody else would, I don't know, just have walked away, said, right, that's it, I'm walking out of your life, I'll sue you, I'll find other ways to deal with you in court. She feels that that's her only way of getting away from it all.
I think she had, throughout the novel, right until the end, she had absolutely no, or in my opinion, she had no self-respect. And it was only at the end that you see that she actually, you know, she retrieves her self-respect, if you like. And that, although what somebody was saying earlier about the journey, her journey was very slow, obviously, until the end, and then it just happened, you know, and self-respect was there. And of course that's when you sort of feel for it. So I'm glad I finished the novel, but as I say, had it not been part of a book club read, I probably wouldn't have, which would have been the wrong thing to do, I think.
I think her choice of career for me, and maybe coming at it from, you know, here I am in America and in Southern California, but the fact that she's such a wreck at home and her personal life, and then she is so capable in her work life. But as it turns out, in other countries, when you're standing in front of the court, you're putting on a different outfit and a wig and a robe. And so you are changing your physicality. And so it's almost like for her, it's putting on this uniform and almost putting up this barrier. So she's not that same person that she is at home. She's completely changed herself. And then after Carl is no longer with us, she doesn't need that anymore to be capable in both places.
Except when she goes to the wine bar.
Except when... I can completely agree with that. I used to be in the police, and when I was in a uniform section, it was like putting on a different person when you put your uniform on. I'm more quiet at home, but I have to be this forthright person that can talk to people in any situation, in violent situations, when you put the uniform on. So it is when you kind of put a new mask on. And I agree with you, Carolyn, that that's what she will have been doing, even though she was trampled and down when she wasn't in a wig and gown. The fact that she was able to carry on will have been because she was putting the whole outfit on.
And you're stepping into a role then, aren't you? I think, because it's a bit like, I mean, I've been a teacher for, you know, donkey's years as well. And I mean, there's not a uniform that goes with that, but it's really interesting. There's a whole load of psychology about, you know, kind of roles, that role behavior and attachment to roles. And then what happens when you step into that role. It's interesting, isn't it? And then thinking, Rebecca, just about what you were saying about the police.
Right, we've been talking for 50 minutes. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say about Blood Orange? It's actually been longlisted for Speakston's Crime Novel of the Year, which is a UK award. So it's actually been longlisted for the Novel of the Year here. So we'll have to see how far it gets.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see as well, because I know that she's finished her second book now, which I think is coming up for publication at some point. I think it might have been one of the ones that's been postponed because of COVID. But and I'm not sure whether her second one, does anyone know? Has anyone had proofs or whatever? You know, whether it's another barristery, you know, one. It'd be really interesting to see how
I pre-ordered it on Amazon.
Have you?
Oh. What's the release date, Carolyn? What's the release date?
For us, I'm assuming that you guys would probably get it previous to us, but for me it's December 1st, 2020.
All right.
I suppose just to finish, I absolutely loved it. I really did like the book. It gripped me from the start. I just had to follow all the sort of three stories. I hated some of the characters. I felt sorry for the main character. I felt sorry for Carl a little bit at first until it all turned out what he was. But you know, I really enjoyed it. I just couldn't put the book down.
I was just thinking, picking up on what a couple of you were saying about, you know, we don't get to understand why Alison, you know, is as kind of passive and denying, sort of, you know, as she seems to be. And it made me think about, you know, the girl on the train, you know, so then we have another drinker. But we are told then, aren't we? You know, isn't it, you know, it's the breakdown of her marriage and stuff. So we are given a reason then. And so, yeah, you know, I hadn't thought about that, but it is just really interesting that, you know, we're just plunged into, this is how she is when we see her. And we aren't offered any explanation or any information as to sort of, you know, why she is that way. Something else also just occurred to me is, I don't know if this has been optioned for television. I know it's her debut, but it kind of, you know, made me think about Appletree Yard, you know, and is this going to be, you know, Appletree Yard, you know, number 2? I think actually it's got a really good visual element, you know, to it, and it's got a bit of the sexy autoerotic, if that's your thing. It's not mine.
She said quickly.
It's got, well, the equivalent of the shags in the crypt and, you know, whatever of Appletree Yard. But you know, it could be really good, couldn't it?
Yeah,
on telly.
Very much so, I think. I think I read somewhere that it has actually been optioned. So I can't remember whether it was a film or TV, but equally, I think it would be, you know, that it's so visual, and the detailing, and that's something I really loved about the writing. Even when it was really grimy and I didn't really want to know, it still kind of got me that you couldn't avoid seeing what was happening. It was absolutely, you know, graphic in its detail.
That train toilet thing, you know, when she's leaving piss, you know, and like, oh no, that bag, her lovely bag.
It was a bit like watching a car crash, wasn't it? It was horrible, but you couldn't look away. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Craig.
Next month we're going to do thrillers. Does anybody want to recommend one for the vote?
And what have you got already on your list, Rebecca?
Orphan X, 3 hours, and the...
It's 3 hours, Rosamund Lupton.
Yes.
Oh, I want to read that.
I want to read
and
that
American Dirt. American Dirt, and I'm thinking of the British thriller by Tony Kent, his first one, because it's a series.
Oh, yeah.
But is American Dirt a thriller? So when you say thriller, you don't mean like thriller, action thriller?
Yeah, I'm thinking more action thriller. Yeah, they're running through the desert to escape, aren't they?
Ah, okay.
In American Dirt. So, I don't know if anybody wants to recommend anything. Sorry, did you want to recommend?
Can I have a think? And if I think of
I'm
anything,
can I
send you a quick email?
Yeah, I'm going to put the blog post up in the morning, Vicky, though.
Okay.
Because I want to do a quick turnaround again, get the voting by the end of the week, and then do 3 weeks to read.
Yeah.
If everybody's happy for 3 weeks reading.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll get the vote up tomorrow, do it by the end of the week, and then that'll give us 3 weeks again to read it.
3 weeks today, really?
No, it'll be 4 weeks today by the time we've got the vote in. So 3 weeks from finding out what the book voted in
is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Also, I think it was Vicky mentioned it had been asked to speak to the author. I will try some months to get the author in at the start of the meeting, not ask them to wait for the whole meeting and have them listen to what everybody's got to say. But that'd just be helpful.
Oh, hello, you've got a lovely doggy.
Hello, Lexi.
Oh,
but I will try and get some authors in for that. We've had cats and dogs this month.
You can't see him because he's too lazy taking a nap, but I got one of mine right next to my feet.
He's very well behaved. I've had to lock my 2 out.
I've had to lock mine in. He kept barking.
Yeah, so I was afraid mine might, but they've been quite good behind the door. So thanks everyone for coming again. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
work.
Thanks
See
for
you.
organising.
Bye.
Bye.
Together. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.